And that's a little bit about what we've been talking about this semester here in Clue. We've been going through the book of 1 John. A book that was written by the Apostle John, who walked with Jesus. Maybe you know him as Saint John. Maybe you remember how I've referred to him as Grandpa John. 90 years old when he writes this, to his dear beloved children in the faith. And we've talked about how John, Grandpa John, is basically laying out in this book that, man, if you know Jesus, it changes the way you live. And if you know Jesus, it changes the way that you love. And that's true today. Jesus changes things. And so my hope tonight as we look at chapter 3 and begin to dive into chapter 3 of 1 John is that we would understand what God has done. Understand what God has done. Last year, the movie Les Miserables came out. Before that, it was a hit Broadway musical. And 100 years before that, it was a novel written by Victor Hugo. And if you know the story centers around the character of Jean Valjean, a criminal. Well, you can call him a criminal, but really he was a poor man who tried to steal a loaf of bread to feed his hungry niece. Got caught, and was thrown into prison for 13 years, tried to escape, got more time. In the eyes of the state, the man was a criminal. But he did his time. During his period of parole, he wandered off, was treated poorly, had nowhere to stay. In fact, he went door to door, being rejected, until one day, one evening, he was told by somebody in the streets, well, no, you haven't tried every door, try that door over there. And the individual led him to the door of Monsignor Bienvenu, the bishop of the town. Now this Monsignor, this bishop, for those of you who aren't familiar, is really the Christ figure in the story. If you read the book, the first 70 pages are all about him and his life. His piety before God, how his devotion to God changes the way he lives, and it changes the way he loves, kind of like we're talking about here in 1 John. This bishop stands out against the world. When everyone else shut their doors, he opens it up. In fact, you never see this in the movie, but in the book you learn that he actually lived in this large house. He switched with the hospital across the street so the hospital could have more room for beds for sick people. He lives in the hospital. And his house is a hospital. His name, Bienvenu, means welcome. And he opens his door to this outcast, this criminal. He treats him like an equal. He feeds him. He gives him a bed to sleep in. Well, as many of you know the story, in the middle of the night, Jean Valjean wakes up, steals the silverware, runs into Monsignor Bienvenu, knocks him out, runs down the street. The cops catch him. They bring him back. He's found out. Found out to be who he truly is, a criminal. They bring him to the door. They've roughed him up a little bit. They come to the bishop and say, we found the man. The bishop's response, oh, I'm so glad you brought him. You forgot these. He goes over to the table and he grabs the silver candlestick holders. Tells them, these are way more valuable than the silverware. I can't believe you left them behind. To which the police are shocked and say, so you're saying that he told the truth? We know that he didn't, but the bishop says, oh yes, you guys can let him go. Still shocked, they untie his shackles and give him over to the bishop. Puts the candlesticks in his sack. He pulls them close and he looks in his eyes and says, I've ransomed you from fear and hatred, and now I give you back to God. And from there the story continues, and that one act of grace, that one act of love, that one act of kindness changes everything for Jean Valjean. In fact, in the story, Jean Valjean becomes the Christ figure. He's the one who becomes gracious, compassionate, no longer hardened by the law, but set free by love. And my point tonight is just simply this. When you understand what God has done for you, it changes everything. When you truly grasp the extent of God's love for you, it changes everything. So tonight there's just three things I want to share with us from 1 John chapter 3. And hope that we understand. But let me just pray before we dive into it. God, only you, by your power and your Spirit, can allow us to understand the things that are of you. And you've revealed those things through your Son, Jesus Christ. Help us gain understanding this evening. Amen. Well, if you have a Bible, you can turn with me to 1 John chapter 3, or you can grab the sheet that's underneath your seat there. I gave you guys some notes tonight for those of you who like jotting down notes. If there's not one under your seat, you can kind of raise your hand, look around you. There's some extras under the seats that can get passed up to you. But I'm going to start by reading in 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. And the first thing I desire for us to understand tonight is that for us to understand who you are, because when we understand who we are, it changes everything. And this is how he starts off in chapter 3. Let's read together. It says, "How great the love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God. And what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself just as he is pure." So when it comes to understanding who you are in this verse, I see two things for us to understand. First, understand your new identity as a Christian. Understand your new identity as a Christian. Look at these words. How great the love the Father has lavished on us. The Father has lavished great love on those who are his. In fact, you don't see it here in my translation, but in the Greek, the first word is idete. Behold, see. It's a command. You, check this out. Understand. Look. Look at how great God's love is and what he has done. And how great is it that God has called those who are his children. That he's taken you in off the streets. Apart from God's love, kind of like Elliot was sharing earlier in his testimony, we're out there in the world, doing the ways of the world, walking the streets of the world, looking for a home, looking for a place to find rest for our souls. We're sinful, we're scathed, we're thieves, we don't belong anywhere. But God has adopted us, he's chosen us, he's opened the door, and he's let us in. But it goes on to say that when you belong to him, the world no longer recognizes you. Because the world doesn't know us. Because once you go in that door, once you open up your life, once he comes in, you don't belong to the world anymore. That's not your identity. It's not who you are. You're his kid. That's why the world doesn't know us. Because now we're someone who's called out of the world. Ekkaleo in the Greek. It's where we get the word ecclesia, which is the word in English we translate church. Church, it's not just the place you go to sing songs. Church, it's not the place for potlucks. It's not the place just for prayers and sitting up, standing up, sitting down. Church is a group of people who are called out of this world. The world doesn't recognize them any longer. They're different because they're his. We are now children of God. And when you're a kid of the King, there's rights and privileges that come with that. You're his, you belong to his kingdom. It makes a difference. There's a story I once heard, you may have heard me tell it before, of a girl who was adopted at a young age. And this person who was just curious asked her, "Are you ever jealous of the other kids?" She says, "Oh no. Those other kids, their parents got stuck with them. My parents, they chose me. Wasn't wanted, wasn't loved, yet chosen. Like Jean Valjean, like Christ gave himself up for us and offers us fellowship with the family. Understand your new identity as a Christian. And also, understand your new destiny as a Christian. Understand your new destiny as a Christian. Look at the second half of verse 2. And what will be has not yet been made known. If you're a Christian tonight, who you're becoming, you don't even completely know the end goal. It's that good. It's better than you can imagine. It is the presence of God, the fullness of God, the fullness of Jesus, and we've only had a glimpse of these things. We see these things dimly now. But we know this promise in verse 3 that when he appears, rest of verse 2, when he appears, we shall be like him. We shall be like Jesus. It doesn't mean we'll be gods. It means that we will reflect him. That we will be pure like he is pure. By his blood, we will be fully cleansed. The sin that mars our lives and haunts us now and still messes with our minds will be washed away forever. This is salvation completed. This is the fullness of the story. It's when it all comes full circle. We shall be like him. Which honestly, isn't that what a Christian is? A little Christ? A Christian? Someone who is like him. And it's important that we understand this destiny because this is the end goal. This is the ultimate. This isn't just a, hey, I get to live my way and then I kind of barely get redeemed at the end and then I get something being like Christ, which is kind of okay. No, there is nothing better. There is nothing more satisfying, nothing more pure, nothing more life-giving, nothing more free than being like Christ. And if that is the end goal for us who are Christians here tonight, then why are we on a path going somewhere else? That's the point that John is making here. Grandpa John is saying, my young, dear children in the faith, this is where we're going. And there's no greater joy now than getting on that path and walking towards him. Because one day we're going to see him as he is. And the conclusion of verse 3 is this. So everyone who has this hope purifies himself because he is pure. If you understand that Jesus is pure and that's where you're headed, then you purify yourself. I want to be like him. I want to follow him. I want to know him. I want my soul to drink from who he is. I want to find satisfaction in him. There's humility in that. He's Jesus, I'm not. Jesus, make me more like you. Make me pure. In previous weeks, I've talked about Gnostic teaching that was going on during this time. This Greek form of teaching that basically was saying, we have a higher knowledge, we have a revelation, a special knowledge that is from something beyond this Jesus thing. And they would even be so pious as to say, you know what, the sin thing doesn't affect me. I can do whatever I want in my flesh, because my flesh isn't what really counts, it's my spirit that counts. So the flesh can go do whatever it wants, and the spirit inside of me, well, that's just enlightened. And John's saying, no, you can't divide the two. They're all part of you. They're one and the same. You can't divide the flesh and the spirit. Purify yourself. Purify it all. The way you live, the way you think, the way you are. See, because when you understand what God has done for you, it changes everything. So understand who you are, Christian. It's a big deal who we are.